Welcome to I See What You Mean, a podcast about how people get on the same page or don't, or perhaps shouldn't. Today my guest is Cal Shintani. Cal's a federal government consulting colleague who's mentored a lot in his career, which we're going to discuss today. Cal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lou. Appreciate being on the podcast. I've listened to several of them. A lot of friends have participated, so I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Why don't we start with a short bio about yourself?
Sure. So, Cal Shintani, I was a Navy submariner many moons ago and served for 7 years active duty. And once I got out, I've really been in the federal technology contracting community ever since. As you mentioned, mostly consulting, systems integration is the primary expertise. And I've had all sorts of roles, primarily BD oriented, capture, but I've had operations. I've run a 300-person organization for one of the large integrators, and I have worked both large and small businesses. And then throughout my career, I've been involved in various parts of M&A, whether we're being part of due diligence, acquire a company. I have been in a company that was acquired, but mostly on the acquisition side and helping do due diligence, but more importantly from my perspective, and also perspective getting on the same page, is the acquisition integration, making sure that stuff works. You had mentioned mentoring. I've had a great opportunity to mentor quite a bit in my career, and some of it's been more formal mentoring. Both you and I are part of this organization, ACT-IAC, and they have this great professional development program called Partners, and I was a partner back in 2003. And after that, we created a mentor protege program for folks who were more on the entry side, only about 5 to 10 years in the industry, both government and industry.
Right.
We started that program in 2005, and I've been fortunate to be able to be a mentor almost every year since it started in 2015.
That's a great run.
Yeah, it's been great, and I've had lots of fun doing it, and I've met lots of incredible people.
Yes.
And as most people who are in a mentor-protege relationship, the mentor probably learns as much. So it's been really, really great.
The M&A experience you have is very interesting, and let's work our way toward that. But let's start with the mentor.
Sure.
The mentor experience you have. Let's say first a word about ACT-IAC. It's a hyphenated title.
American Council for Technology, which is the government side, and Industry Alliance.
Industry Advisory.
Advisory Council, right.
I was just going to say, for listeners who didn't know, it's a fabulous organization. It's really two organizations, one on the government side, one on the contractor side, who unite in it's a not-for-profit, in a way to exchange information, build relationships, to sort of bridge that divide between government and industry at nothing political. I mean, I think we should say this is not about any kind of DNR politics. This is about, I think the issues that ACT-IAC works on, we could say are more operational. They're strategic and operational for organizations.
Yes, that is true. And it's also to really understand kind of what the other side, how they do things, what they're trying to achieve. And by having that open dialogue in a safe space, if you will, you can actually get a lot going more forward, getting on the same page.
Yeah, that's right. That's
your words, right?
And they do quite a bit to develop professionals at a couple different levels of career.
Yes.
And
so it started with the partner program, which I mentioned, which is really focused at the GS 14, 15 level and rough industry equivalents, so VP or above. And we would spend a year in a group of anywhere from 20 to 30. Sometimes it got larger, but that was the ideal group. And each equal parts government and industry. And so you worked as that larger group and got some leadership development kinds of training, but then also paired up with one government as an industry guy, I would pair up with one individual from the government, and got to learn a little bit more about what they do, how they work, that sort of thing. And then since then they started the Voyagers program, which I said was for that 5 to 10 year in industry, that individual. So a little more junior.
Right.
And then since then they've started an associates program, which really is for the entry level, that says, here are some up and comers who've only been in industry or government for a couple of years. Let's get them access and exposure to these leadership development ideas, but also just the interaction of how government and industry can actually work together instead of just being on opposite sides of the fence.
It's great. It's great. It's excellent networking in the best sense of the term.
Oh, it truly is. It truly is. And we've, because of that, lots of friends who are or have been government civil servants.
That's right.
And we've had the first several Voyagers programs. We had more Voyagers who started in industry and then moved to government as part of this program. Like, oh wow, this is really cool. I think I'm gonna go work on the other side. So it's been great.
So they do some working groups. They call them different things over time. But some work and a joint between government and industry.
Yes.
They're staffed or they're populated by government and industry members. I was on acquisition. There's cybersecurity, right? They have different work groups that do information sharing about the topic, perhaps hold sessions that open invitation to the whole entire community, maybe write reports. There's some good thinking that goes on across the line between government and industry when we're not talking about a solicitation or a proposal going on, right? It's just good information exchange to, like you said, understand how the other side sees things. I mean, this is what, right?
Exactly.
Getting on the same page. What do you see? What do you make of what you see, right? We have those conversations across a line like that. That's a very big and important line between government and industry. But they collaborate to get things done, so greater understanding produces greater results.
One of the, if I may, one of the workshops that we've run on and off through partners and then Voyagers is kind of a role swapping where there's a couple of us, as an industry person, I'm supposed to wear a government contracting officer's hat or a COTAR's hat, and my government counterpart does the other thing. And you're coming in for that initial fact-finding session. And so my job that I was told by my boss is to get them interested in bidding, but tell them as little as I can. And of course, this government person who's now acting as an industry person has to say, hey, I'm just trying to find out as much as I can and also kind of pitch my company. And you go through that, and at the end of it, both sides of us go, oh my gosh, that was hard.
Yeah, it's mind-bending.
It's incredible. So
that's brilliant.
And that is one of the workshops where people go, oh wow, I really, really get it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I actually was not aware of that, Cal, and I'm glad you mentioned it. That's a fantastic example of shifting the frame or a perspective, right? And you take on that role, even if it's an exercise.
Right.
But when you put your head in there, you're using your brain to go, okay, I have a little mission right now in this meeting.
Right.
And how do I do this?
Right.
And then you realize that you come to understand what you didn't know about how the other side operated, maybe assumptions you made about how the other side operated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It's a great program. I've just had really enjoyed being able to participate and gotten a lot out of it myself.
Well, let's talk about that then in terms of the mentor protege roles, activities that the relationship you have and the things that a mentor and a protege do together. The term is used often to refer to perhaps a relatively informal relationship.
Yes.
But you've also had experience where it was more formal.
Yes.
Tommy, I mean, it raises some really interesting questions about what it means to get on the same page. How do we get on the same page? What do we do if we can't get on the same page? Right. So tell me something about the same page that mentors and proteges get on.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think that part of the mentor's job is to get on the page to understand what the protege is trying to deal with. Mm-hmm. If I'm working with someone, and whether it's career development or they come and say, hey, Cal, here's I'm working this project and I'm really having a tough time getting through to X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. If I jump in and say, well, hey, I've been through this before, so let me tell you, young child, how to get this done. You're not going to get anywhere, right? And so it's a series of asking lots of questions. You can give some advice, but I find asking questions, one, to understand where they are, to get their ideas of how they might be able to move forward. Then you could give some, well, yes, I've tried that way. Here are a couple results when I tried it.
Right.
The first way you mentioned, plan B, here's a couple things. So how's the best way for you to work through it? And so I really do try to get on their page, because if I just come in, coming from the mountaintop with my 2 tablets, it's not going to get me anywhere.
So this is like the workshop you mentioned, where the government and industry participants switched roles. What you're saying is the first thing you attempt to do is understand what the protege is understanding, the way they understand it.
Yes. Yeah. What are your challenges? What have you tried? What works? What doesn't? What are you trying to achieve? What are the downsides if you don't achieve it? All of that, to let them talk through it.
This is interesting. Let me ask you. I want to get to a real specific point on this, because you and I are in our 60s, right?
Right.
And we have, one of the things about a mentor is that there's a probability of having been through something that the mentee or protege is going through. So it would be easy to understand what they're telling you and have had that experience one or more times and know exactly what they should consider. Maybe what they try is their business, but you might know exactly what they should consider. You could interact with them in a way that's like they're Googling you, right? They're hitting you. Hey, Cal, here's the situation. What do I do? And you have an answer. You spit an answer out, right? Or you,
right.
But here's what I want to get at. I'm guessing, and I want you to tell me how this works. I'm guessing that produces a certain kind of conversation. Compared to, separate from, or I'm going to contrast. If you resist the temptation to advise,
to give an answer,
yes, if you resist the temptation to give an answer, and you spend a little bit more time, as you said, asking questions, where your intent is to understand the situation they're in the way they understand it, you're putting yourself in a different mindset or mind frame by doing that. And my guess is that changes the conversation.
Yes, I totally agree.
Tell me how it's different, and then how it goes.
Yeah, if someone comes to me and says, Cal, here's my challenge. I've done X and Y. It's not working. What do you think? And I say, oh yeah, been there, done that. Here's what happened to me and what I did and why it was successful. That's a point in time, and they say, okay, thanks, and they go try it, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If you ask lots of questions to see what they've already tried, and then offer up, well, what happens if you try X? What are the pluses and minuses? What happens if you try Y, pluses and minuses? What happens if you try Z? It's teach the person to fish instead of giving them a fish. If you can walk them through that process, then they know next time. Same thing, whether it's formal mentoring like I was able to do with ACT-IAC, or the informal mentoring, you're the leader of a team and you have some folks coming to you.
Right.
If you always give them the answer, then they'll just come back and ask for the answer. And if you actually let them work through the thought process and think of all the things that you would think of, and then they come to you and say, okay, coach, here's the deal. I've run into an obstacle, and here's the 3 things I'm considering, the pluses and minuses. I'm going this way. What do you think? Then that's what you want. You want them to be able to come up with those kind of ideas too.
There's a difference that I heard you say that I think is very important, and I want to highlight it. Let's say some protege talking to you, they need some help. Let's say that there's an immediate or urgent or sort of primary need. They are in a situation. They have there's something they need to figure out to do. And the easy thing would be to sort of cut to the chase, cut to that part of the conversation, come up with that. But what you said is different, that is important, is if you help someone figure out their own way of thinking, of processing, if you ask a lot of questions and help them explore, that's a skill they can take to the next situation.
Exactly, yes.
Because some other situation is going to be a different situation with a different challenge and a different answer. If you're always looking for the answer, you'll always be asking somebody, what do I do in a different situation? If you learn, like you said, if you learn for yourself what works the best for you to sort all these things out, to work through it, to process, to weigh options, to try things. If you learn how to do that, you can always do that in any situation, any time. So the difference in the conversation is, one, you get them the answer, or you move more directly to answering the question. The way you described you do it is teaching them how to think through it.
Yes, and to your point, you don't necessarily have to understand everything about
Right.
that person's business,
Right.
which is also,
True.
you need to be careful on things like that too, right? Is, don't give answers in an area that's not necessarily your area of expertise, but you can always ask lots of really good questions that help someone kind of get to their own answers.
Yes, yes. I like that. So you answered my question about the page to get on by saying the mentor has a responsibility to try to get on the mentee's page, right?
Yes.
And that's a means to an end. You're trying to understand from their point of view,
Yes.
to do what we just described, to help them think it through. Maybe there isn't even a single answer that emerges out of that conversation, right? A decision.
Correct.
But they've maybe extended or deepened how they're thinking about something. They can keep mulling that over after the call, and they can come to their own decision, when they're ready. You sort of get on their page to help them do that. Now that's interesting, because there isn't really a same page going on in there. It doesn't have to be. I'm just curious. My whole thing is getting on the same page, but I don't know if there really is one there.
Yeah, when you and I first started talking, gearing up to this conversation, I kind of mulled through, is there a same page? And from a mentor-protege perspective, my belief is you're trying to get on their page. But through this relationship, you end up, finding a similar page that's, neither yours nor theirs. So you
Right.
get to that same language after they've heard me ask my questions and never give an answer however many times. they start to get like, okay, he's not going to give me the answer, but he's going to ask me lots of great questions. And so they
shift their mindset
yeah,
a little bit.
So they shift a little bit too. Yeah. So I don't impose my page, if you will,
right.
on them.
Right.
But after
Good point.
after a year of working together, you definitely know each other. And the amazing thing about the ACT-IAC Mentor Protege program is you end up knowing some of those folks better than some of your own people on your team. And that's the funny thing, is when I started doing the Voyager Mentor Protege, I was at a large systems integrator and had a group of 300 some people, which to tie later on had some original company people and several acquisitions.
Right.
And I looked in the mirror and said, why am I not doing this
with my own people?
And I had the great fortune to have a couple people who were really passionate about getting this kind of program going, and said, hey, folks, what do you think? And it just launched and ended up, the company actually adopted it sort of for a company-wide thing that started off just in my little corner. But yeah, it was very much, hey, eat your own dog food, or hey, you're creating this great stuff over here, why aren't you using it for yourself?
Let's come back to that, because it's got some a mentor protege program within an organization has some important HR implications. But let's come back to that.
Yes, it does.
Let's come back. I want to highlight what we can wrap up what we were talking about. I want to highlight what you said, which is, let's say Lou and Cal first call, mentor protege relationship. I have an own page, you have an own page.
Yep.
Your effort is to try to understand my page. But as you said, over time of working together, I come to understand yours, something about yours. I come to understand how your mind operates. I come to understand how you're going to interact with me. So over time, what you said, my interpretation of what you said was, we do build something of a same page from the two own pages. It's a third thing. It's separate.
Yes. Yeah. It's the in-between page.
That's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
What occurred to me while you were describing how over time, like you said, a year into a relationship, something happens in that time, though, that's about trust.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Right. So there's there's a lot of trust built in. If I'm the protege, I come to trust you. I never thought about it till we're talking about it now, Cal. Though I wonder if do you both come to trust in that third thing? Feel like, hey, we've created something we can stand on, we can lean on, we can. Is that a thing or not?
Yes. So before I lose the train of thought,
Go ahead.
for the ACT-IAC mentor-protege program, we actually talk about that cone of silence or cone of trust, that coming into the relationship, I, as the mentor, will not talk about what I've talked about with the protege.
That's right.
Unless I get their explicit permission. To your point of a company mentor-protege program, we can't always do that. There are some, HR serious issues where we say, I'm sorry, I have to take off my mentor role. If you aren't going to report this, then it's my responsibility to report it.
Right.
So
certain
I think
circumstances
that's where you were going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And onto the, that shared page, you definitely do develop a sense of trust through that mentor-protege relationship, and it extends. I mean, I've had folks that I first met in 2005 who've called me up and said, hey, how's it going? Or, folks somewhere in that pipeline say, hey, I'm getting ready to take on a new job in my company, or I'm looking at this new job. What are some of your thoughts, and what are the pluses and minuses, and what would you look out for? So still have a lot of that, which is one thing that I love about the program.
Yeah, because at that point, it's just really it's a more of a relationship of equals at that point.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. A lot of these folks are now chief growth officers. Some have started their own companies.
Yeah.
They're SESs in the government.
Right.
They've just taken off, and it's just so much fun to see, and to see how they use some of what they learned in that mentor protege program, and definitely advance the ball a lot faster and better than I could have.
Well, then here's a question. There's a phrase that came to mind as you were talking, and pay it forward. Have you seen people become mentors in the more formal way, or have you seen people just adopt the practices and the approach that they learned in the role with you, and then maybe they take that on as a way of their interacting more with their staff or their team or their colleagues?
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that, and I won't claim any. Hey, it's because of discussions we had. But I've definitely seen people that I met early in their career who have adopted, who have become leaders in the ACT-IAC mentor protege program, who develop their own teams as they grow either their business or their government side of the business.
Right.
And you definitely see a lot of these leaders, take what they learned and apply it and amp it up and do even more. And that's what makes it so much fun, is to see how people can take what you're trying to impart and do even better with it.
Well, it seems if they had a positive experience with it, which is what we're talking about.
Yes.
That they want to have that with others. They want others to have that.
Yes, absolutely.
And whether, like you said, these are folks who've come into leadership positions, whether or not they establish a program, you could just take the ways that you learned to talk to think, to interact with someone. You could take those and just practice them.
Yes.
In your next staff meeting, right? In the next team meeting,
right.
In the next conversation. I love conversations like that, because there's often an aha moment someone has. Like, oh man, Cal asked me that question. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Right.
Sometimes something occurs to you immediately. Sometimes you just realize, ooh, I got to think about this because I don't know what I think, but I hadn't thought about it that way. So now I'm going to, right?
Yeah.
So people can just adopt those practices and use them independent of a mentor protege program.
Sure.
And you're just making for better conversations with people.
Absolutely. Do it in your staff meeting. Do it in a one-on-one when someone comes to you with a problem, and you just ask a lot of questions instead of saying, oh, I know the answer.
Now, how did you avoid the feeling on their part of being asked a lot of questions feels like an interrogation, or feels like how was it more conversational than just a barrage of questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't remember someone, pushing back and saying, "Oh, you're just interrogating me." Actually, the one person, it's my adult daughter, as she's made decisions in her career, all I do is ask her questions like, come on, Dad, what do you think? It's like, it doesn't matter what I think. You're the one making the decision. But yeah, I haven't, yeah, it's like, hey, stop asking me questions. I want to, let's get to the meat of it. So yeah,
Well, I know you,
there's
and
a fine line.
I know you, and I wouldn't think an interaction with you in which you were asking a lot of questions would feel awkward, or feel like
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
you would do it that way.
it's a
But
conversation. Yep.
yeah, because what I'm wondering is if for listeners, like what I'm thinking, what someone could take away from what we're saying.
Right.
So you don't want to just quote unquote ask a lot of questions. That isn't very conversational. It could almost be off-putting. It could almost be.
Yeah. Yeah, you do have to offer, as you're asking questions, when I found this,
You shared something.
I tried X. Have you considered something like
Right,
that?
right.
If they say either yes or no, you say, well, here's some of the pluses and minuses when I went down that path. So you also share.
Right.
It's not just asking lots of questions.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we might have talked about this, one of the things I'm working on for coaching is a method that focuses on 4 questions or 4 aspects of a situation. What does someone see in a situation, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do they make of what they see?
Mm-hmm.
What would they do about what they see? To what end?
Right.
So I'm working on this because I find if I understand that, sometimes I gotta understand about my own thinking, right?
Right.
If I understand that about you, if I understand that about in a personal relationship, let alone a business relationship,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
if I understand what you see in a situation, what you make of it, what you would do, and why, like to what end, I have a much clearer picture in my mind of understanding what you understand the way you understand it. It might not be
Mm-hmm.
complete, but the attempt is to
Sure.
understand.
Sure.
And I don't have to agree, but
Right. Yep.
but to your very first original point, one of the first things you said is, I want to know what the experience is like for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I can help them better if I know what they're going through. Not because I've been through it, and so therefore I have greater knowledge and I can just like come in like the oracle, not the Greek oracle.
Not the company.
Right. Thank you. But to understand the way and here's what I find, and this is why I asked you the question I asked you. If I ask those questions and understand something the way you understand it, it gives me a much better place for a conversation with you.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
It doesn't feel so much like outside in. I kind of get inside out, and sometimes you make that person you're talking to rethink those things too. Like, wow, I know what I saw and I made something of it one way, but you're right. There could be a different way to think about what happened, a different way to think about what someone said, or a different way to think about the tone of voice. Right, that you can just rethink.
Right. Yes.
So it opens up some possibilities I think are productive. And having heard me say those things, what do you see? What do you make of it? What would you do? Why? I suppose you would say that a lot of your conversations sort of hovered around those things, even if you weren't asking those exact questions.
Yeah, they weren't those exact questions, but they very much
were getting at those kinds of
kind of what you're trying to do is it's making a decision, lots of parts involved, and so if you don't understand all the aspects you mentioned, you don't have the full picture, right?
And of course, I'm working on this as much for really not at all for a mentor-protege relationship. I'm working on it for leaders and teams.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So really important in a team conversation. Let's say a team's facing some situation with a client or project management, budget, schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I know people on a team, because of different training, different areas of expertise, different responsibilities on the team, different Myers-Briggs type, what different role in the company, lots of reasons you see something a certain way. So to exchange information with each other about what someone sees, what they make of it, what they would do, and why they would do that thing, at least lets others on the team say, all right, Cal's in charge of the budget. I wasn't thinking about that kind of thing at all.
Right.
Now I see what he is facing, or now I see what he means.
And your last question, to what end, could actually be answered differently by different parts of the team, right?
Very much so.
The PM versus the finance person versus the engineer.
Very much so.
Yep.
And then to understand what the end is to open up some possibilities about means. Well, how about what if you couldn't get on the same page with someone, Cal? You're a mentor, you have a mentor protege relationship. What if you couldn't get on the same page with them?
Yeah, and that unfortunately did happen a couple times where, that person just got overcome by life and work and whatever, and just didn't come to the table. We try to have a monthly call and get together face to face, however often. And there have been times during that program that it just didn't happen. And you try, but you can't force the mentor protege relationship. And
Right.
so you offer things when you can, and sometimes if they're going off, they're just buried in a proposal or some deliverable or something's happened on the family side, you offer up some things every so often just to say, hey, I just ran across this article, thought it might be interesting, or I was just talking to Sue, who works in programs around you, and she had these interesting ideas. So you can try,
And even
but
if
you can't force it.
nope, and even if the chemistry's just not good, do you acknowledge it and just part amicably? What we don't always get on the same page with people. What
Yes.
happens?
So part of what I try to do is, either whether it's a relationship that's going great or one that isn't going as great as I personally would like, is I don't have the answers to everything, and sometimes you know that individual is really looking for expertise or experience in an area that really isn't mine, and
Fair enough.
so I'll say, I'm really not able. I can ask some good questions and maybe help you sort through it, but here's a couple other folks you might want to talk to that,
Yeah.
could
Okay.
give you some
Okay.
good ideas, and I'll make the introduction, and then they can take it from there.
So you acknowledge a limit or a boundary that you
Yes.
saw.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
That's fair. That's, I think, respectful.
Yes.
I think it doesn't harm the relationship. It's respecting the person. It's effective. I think that's a great piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift to the M&As, by which we mean merger and acquisition, right? And they are very unique events.
Yes, they are.
Companies can do it, can grow that way. They can do a lot of it. That doesn't mean that a lot of consultants are involved in it, and you kind of up
Yes.
close and personal, right?
Yes. Yes.
What were the roles you played in an M&A or
Yeah.
two?
So variety of roles. In the beginning, it was CEOs looking to acquire a company. Come in. You're our BD expert in this particular field. Look at this company and help make a determination. Are they value add? Can we make 1 + 1 equal something more than two?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
coming in just on the due diligence side to say, hey, with this company's capabilities, customer footprint, contract vehicles, can our two combined companies grow faster than what we're doing together? So that was my first introduction into
Okay.
the M&A process, and then one of those first companies actually was acquired, and then I was asked, all right, help from a business development perspective to integrate their BD with our BD and start looking at those targets you told us that we could chase. Go start chasing them. Be careful what you talk about. And so that was the beginning, and I was able to participate in several of those through several companies. And then when I was at CACI, did that with an acquisition, and then the leader of the acquired company said, you know what, it's time for me to go do something else. And the general manager said, okay, Cal, you helped rope it.
Acquire this company.
I helped you. Now it's your turn to try to go make it work.
You led
And
it.
so I actually led that organization, and then started getting other acquisitions, and through
Sure.
reorgs,
Sure.
some of the quote unquote original part of the company was rolled in, and so really trying to figure out how to bring all of that together.
Yeah.
And
That's really cool.
from the same page perspective, to me, it's probably more important for the people who are coming into the organization to feel like they are value added, that they're valued, that we listen to their expertise, what they've heard as we're going after new procurements, as we're working together. That, I had the fortune to, we had acquired a company that had some really great processes and were already ISO certified. And so how to take what they did and take it across the organization.
Right.
And the people who were leading that were leading it for the entire organization instead of, well, we'll get someone who has the original company brand and they can run it,
Yeah, we're all one team now. So you were involved in activities that would lead up to an acquisition. Might not have, but pre-acquiring, you were involved in the research, homework, due diligence. That then you were involved in integrating functions like the business development function.
Correct.
Post-acquisition, and then you ended up leading the unit that was acquired. Or
yes, okay, the entire business that was acquired. I ended up leading that, and then a couple more pieces of companies got added to it, and then some other organizations that just fit well within that customer and capability footprint.
Let's apply some of the same principles we talked about that were the mentor-protege, that were sort of at the heart of the mentor-protege relationship too. Mm-hmm. One company is bringing another one into it. It could be a smallish number of people. It could be a large number. 300 is a large number of people. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with the same issues of role, relationship, trust, value or worth. Do I fit in? How do I fit in? What do I contribute? Even sometimes, this is part of it. I'm sure you could tell me in detail. Am I going to have a job?
Right. And there's a lot of that.
Are some jobs going to go away? Will it be one of mine? So there's a lot going on in that time, and it's this one day when it happens, but there's many months.
Yeah, many
leading up to it and following it before that dust kind of settles. So what were your same page goals or objectives? What were your thoughts?
The focus, all the companies I've been at, we've acquired companies. You're looking for what they call a cultural fit. And we'll have more discussions on that, but it's like, are you basically approaching the business, your people and the customer the same way? So a lot of the discussions is, people are in the business because they want to be successful. Most of them either want to win new programs or get levels of new responsibility on a program that is just won. Right. And so it's how to show them that given the expertise that they developed in their original company, and now that they're part of this larger company, here's how they can grow personally and professionally and help the company grow at the same time. And so one way to get those folks energized about being part of the new company I found was, actively involving both sides of the company in a new bid. You and I have both worked those proposals late at night, and nothing binds a team as much as those late night working a proposal, and we do it. And it's, it didn't matter which old or new company you came from, people were leading and would say, hey, the company we just acquired has some great processes to do X.
That's cool.
That lady is going to lead this process for us because we're all going to learn. We think that the acquiring company does this other part really well, so that person's going to lead that one. And people start working together, and through those late nights and weekends, they figure out, wow, Sue is an awesome PM. I'll be loving to work with her if we win this thing.
Interesting.
So you do a lot of that.
So you found, if you could, something to get them to work on together sooner rather than later.
Yes. And also purposely tried to find something that company was hoping that they could bid but didn't have the capability. To talk to that capture team and say, all right, we're going to help you. You're still leading, but we're going to help. We're going to give you an engineer here and a proposal person there, and we're going to go win this together. And they're like, wow, this is why this makes sense.
Motivating.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
I like how you said, so culture is just such a big question and seems to be more questions than answers, but I like how you said, cultural fit being, generally, do you approach work to support clients in
Yes.
roughly the same way,
Yep. Yep.
which means what kinds of things? Just make that a little bit more specific.
Yes. And so I've found that asking many questions helps that definition. So I've been in a company that said it was entrepreneurial, and we acquired a company that said it was entrepreneurial. When you drill down, my original companies thought we were entrepreneurial. We did a lot of things, but we had a pretty rigid bid review process. So you could sort out the stuff that, like, okay, we don't have a large probability of win, so let's not waste our resources. Instead, we're going to put a ton of money into this other one. The company we acquired says, hey, we're entrepreneurial, which meant that they bid a lot of things that they hadn't necessarily positioned for, but that's how they were successful. They were wildly successful by bidding 20 projects and winning 5 of them, and that's more than if they had done that
Bid
careful
5.
selection.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's important to understand when you say we're entrepreneurial or we are customer centric or we are employee centric, it means different things to different people, and you really need to ask several questions about that definition.
That's great. It can even mean different things to people within one organization.
Absolutely. Yep.
Ask your customer facing folks who are doing delivery or doing sales what that means, and that could mean something different to other parts of the organization. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the question I always would want to know is, well, are we all clear on that? Or are we not clear on this, right?
Right.
Because if there are differences, we could trip over them. If there are legitimate differences because we have different roles or responsibilities, but we know that, you get a different team, a different team effort. So were you able to foster, think of like circles in a Venn diagram, did they come together a little bit more because of the conversations? Did people start to sort out a shared meaning of something?
Yes, in most cases, we're able to find something that worked. There were a couple instances where one company were employee centric, which meant, they had unlimited vacation and tuition was, way high, and this larger company couldn't afford that for everybody, and so you had to figure out somewhere in the middle. But just that conversation alone shows that you do care about your employees. You're just trying to figure out, okay, what works for this larger organization? How do we make sure that we can be flexible in how we're working with our employees? So sometimes you can have that great Venn diagram where the merger is, that nice big
they come over, they overlap and come.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's the same thing with people. There were some people who said, I'm all in. I love this new organization. And, the thing I just talked about, the company, when was that acquisition? 17 years ago, that are still there and doing very, very well. And others who said, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm going to go try something else. And
that's legit. Yeah, that's legit.
Exactly.
300 people is a lot. If they're in one office building, you actually could get around to them, but they're often on client sites.
Yeah, and
so
that
can
was
be spread around.
Yes, that was the biggest challenge, is that of the 300, 220 to 250 were at client sites, and so that was a big challenge of, how to go around and see all of those people so they felt. So they used to work for a smaller company, and now they feel like they're even more dissociated. And so how to make sure that they knew who the leadership was, that they were cared for, but also that they could start to interact. And it's actually something that we're able to do. Some of my team came to me. It was, their idea. And if nothing else, can recognize other people's really good ideas. And when we started this mentor protege program, we purposely set up, the mentor was in a different organization than the protege. So there was some of that crosstalk. And we started having, we called them bagel breakfast. They all, would be there at 7:30 because they had to clock in at 8 or 8:30. And the programs would start to talk to each other. And after a while, the leadership team, we're just watching it happen because
Isn't that beautiful?
engineers, they're comparing, oh, well, we were just doing this delivery and the customer asked for this, but what did you guys do? And they're going back and forth. And the same thing from a mid-level PM or the team lead who you want to promote to PM, they're getting exposure to other people. And so all of that works really, really well.
That's beautiful when it happens. It's great to see.
Yeah, it's fun.
In an organization that size, though, it would have changed what you did, because now you've got people who are direct reports.
Yep.
And then they've got direct reports. Eventually it gets out to all the people who are leading the work on client sites, but there's a little bit of a hierarchy there, or a lot of hierarchy.
Yes.
And then you're communicating up and down through people, which has all the known challenges.
I would try, like I talked about the bagel breakfast, I would have, go visit, the client sites, and just hey, here's an hour with Cal and the rest of the leadership team.
Yeah.
Where sometimes it's just shooting a breeze and having a bagel. Sometimes, there's
more
always
of an agenda.
A shorter presentation. I wouldn't want to, do death by PowerPoint, but at least kind of, here's where we're going.
Yeah.
As an organization, here's where the company's going. Here's how you fit in, and then talk. But yeah, it takes lots of time to go around and see all those folks, but it's absolutely essential to do.
So how long was it after the acquisition and you got things, you had the idea about the mentor protege program within that organization?
It's probably there a little over a year,
okay.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you had some good, that's interesting, because then you had a period of time where you knew how things were running. You could sort of characterize that time. What happened then after? Did you see a difference in the culture, or did you see a difference in performance? So a year later, after let's say the program's a year old and people are participating in it, what did you see?
Yeah, we had a lot more upward mobility, where before, in order to hire the right PM, we were looking outside. I think we had more upper mobility.
Interesting.
We had folks who had been in one customer set for 5 years or 10 years, and they moved over to another one, and we're able to bring that's good customer experience as well as the new stuff.
Sort of cross
pollinate. Yep. So that worked. And then, as I mentioned, so after probably a year and a half, then the company did another acquisition, and the company they acquired, they actually split into two pieces. One was more intelligence related, and that went off to one group, and I got the other one. And so, having already been through the first one, we're able to integrate those folks in, I think, a little more quickly, and got their leadership integrated in pretty well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You had a fun career, dude.
It was fun. I lucked out with working with lots of really, really good people, and got to do lots of interesting things. It was fun.
All right, my friend. Okay. Thank you for joining the podcast today. I enjoyed our discussion like I knew I would, and we covered a lot of ground and some good things. Thank you.
Blue, it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the discussion, and kind of came away thinking of even new things. Like, here's how I could do a little better on getting on the same page with someone. So I appreciate it.
I love hearing that. It's a great conversation. I think we probably gave listeners a few aha moments of their own and a few things to try.
No, thanks.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. And that's how we see it, my friends. I want to thank Cal for recording today's episode. You can find it at ISeeWhatYouMean.castos.com, plus all the usual places. Send questions and suggestions through your app. Subscribe and give me a 5-star rating unless you can't, in which case, let me know why. And join me next week when we take another look at how to get on the same page and stay there, unless we shouldn't.